Now, heading back to our console, let's look at a couple of business questions just to demonstrate the intuition we learned from the last video on SQL joins. Your manager wants a report that shows all the customer order and when the order was made. For each customer, he wants the customer first name and last name as a single column called customer name. So in this business question, we will be infusing a couple of some of the SQL skills that we have learned from last video. But let's break this business question down. Now it says that your manager wants a report that shows all customer order and when the order was made. So what that means is that every customer will definitely have a first name, right? And every customer would always have a last name, right? From the intuition of the last video, the first thing I said was to write out all the necessary columns that are needed for the business question. So we need the customer first name, we need the customer last name, we also need the customer ID, right? And it says that you want it to show all the customers order. So every order would have a sales order number. So here I would say sales order number. And when the order was made, meaning that we would have an order date. So here would be order date. Right. Now, looking at these columns that we have written, we then now need to assign these columns to the respective table. However, one document that would help us to do that is going to be the ERD, which I have shared in the intuition. So let's look at where the first name, the last name, the customer ID, and the sales order numbers, right, are coming from. So if we go to the ERD, here we have the customer table. We have the customer table where we have the customer ID, the first name and the last name, and we have the sales order header table where we have also the customer ID and the order date. Now, looking at the ERD, it shows that there is a relationship between the two tables based on this arrow here that we have. Now, going back to our console, we can then now say that the first name is coming from the customer table. The last name is also coming from the customer table. The customer ID could also come from either the customer table or the sales order header table based on the ERD diagram. And the sales order number is coming from the sales order header table. The order date is coming from the sales order header table. Now, the next thing we have to do is then to assign aliases to each of these tables. So for all customer table, I'm going to call it a C. For all the sales order headers table, probably I would call it an SO. An SO. Now, the next thing is then to identify the relationship between these two tables, the customer table and the sales order header table. So I'm going to go to my database object here, go to system database and my master database. I'll expand on tables, and in tables here, I then now have the customer table, and in the customer table, I go to columns and I see all the columns. And in the sales order header table, I will expand here and go back to columns, and I'll see all the columns in the sales order header table. Now, going back to the customer table, I have this column as a primary key called the customer ID, right? And also in this table, which is the sales order header table, I have this column called customer ID as a foreign key. Remember from the intuition, I said that the relationship is established on columns that are either a primary key or a foreign key on any of the two tables. So here, what that means is that I can conveniently join these two tables on customer ID. So here, I can then now say relationship between the two tables is equals to customer ID. Now, having done this, I can then now go ahead to write my code. Now, to do this, I would start with the select clause first. So I would say select. Now, what am I selecting? I'm selecting first name. I'm selecting last name. I'm also selecting customer ID. I'm selecting sales order number. And I'm selecting order date. Right, now remember that the customer table have been given a table alias as C. So for every of the columns that are represented from the customer table, I will then now come here and say C dot, C dot, C dot, and from the sales order number, this will be SO dot, and the order date here will then now be what? SO dot. Okay, now where are all these coming from? All these are coming from sales LT dot customer. Now I then now put the alias here and say as C, and I'm joining sales LT dot sales order header as SO. Now, where am I joining them on? I'm joining them on customer ID is equals to customer ID. However, I need to specify that the same customer ID that is in the customer table is the same customer ID that is in the sales order header table. However, for each of those tables, I have specified a table alias. So here I can then now say C dot customer ID is equals to SO dot customer ID. However, we need a concatenation of the first name and the last name as a single column. So what that means is I can then now come here and say concat. So here I can say select concat C dot first name separated by a space, comma, then C dot last name as, I could call this customer name, comma. All right, great. Now, having done this, I can then now run the entire thing here and execute. And I then now have data from two different